Back here on the Joe Show, we've got a special guest joining us today. Former Mansfield senior player and coach Effie James is here to talk about the state of area basketball. So, Coach, glad you could join us here on the show. It's been a while since we've seen each other. Brian had asked me about, if we had ever coached against each other, and no, we didn't. No. But we had a lot of open gyms in the summer out in Ontario where I think you made us a better basketball team, and hopefully we helped make you a better basketball team. So you've been out now for 10 years. I just retired 2 years ago. I guess I know that you still watch a lot of basketball and around basketball, but what's kind of the changes that you've seen over since the time you've gotten out? I guess major changes that you see as you look at the game of baskbasketball. Wow, you said 10 years. I guess it has been 10 years, but one of the biggest things is a three-point shot has always revolutionized the game. But now more than ever, you have to be able to shoot the three. And so many offenses now are geared around that. And that's the one thing that really stands out to me, because you now see, at least even when I was coaching as a player, you see a fast break. And generally, traditional fundamentals say we try to get a layup. Well, now traditional, even drill work, you have guys spreading out to the three, try to draw the defense and kick for a three-point shot. So that's probably the biggest thing that I've seen, how wide open offenses have become. We've always had open offenses, but now it seems like every offense is wide open, and they really talk about spacing and shooting that three-point shot.
The one thing, I agree with that, and the one thing though, in some ways, I think that philosophy's maybe hurt the game a little bit, because one, we have kids that want to take the three.
Right.
But I think as a coach, what I found out over the past, towards the end of my career, is you had to kind of, not that we kind of always did, but you really had to track, like in practice shooting drills, because you had to get kids to understand, that might be a really good shot for Effie to take, but that's not a good shot for Joe to take.
Absolutely.
And convincing kids of that sometimes was pretty difficult. I think the other thing that I've seen change in the game, when I first started coaching, you saw very little ball screens. It was kind of like offensively, I grew up, kind of being a Bob Knight fan, motion offense, pass, cut, and I've seen the game change to that almost every team involves not just the ball screen as a set play, but they involve ball screen continuity, and a lot of spacing, on the floor. So I think defensively, you've got to really be good at just being able to defend one-on-one, because when you put teams in rotation, that makes it much more difficult. Besides that three-point shot, anything else that you kind of have come across that you're like, man, this is a lot different than when I played or when I coached?
And when I look at, the development of players and how it really, it was evolving to, I think we all saw it evolving to a place where it'd be positionless basketball. But now every kid on the court just about can do multiple different things. The true post player no longer really exists. And that speaks to how the game has evolved, even at the high school level. True post players just don't exist. I watched the last few games I've watched, I do little things. I said, let's see how many people actually stop at the block and call for the ball on the block or in the block area. You could go half the game without seeing that now. So where it used to be such a pivotal part, even if you had a small team, you would use the block and have people throw it in. So that's a huge part too, where traditional post play does not exist. It's all about being able to put the ball on the floor and shoot the ball from the perimeter, which again puts defenses in a bind as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I guess I'm a little bit old school, though. I still like to to see that post guy touch it, because I think even at the high school level, though, is if you're able to have that guy, it can create some problems because teams really have to adjust. But I do really agree with you. The skill level of players, some of the things that they can do has really become phenomenal. And I think that's the other thing. I think maybe the game has changed too. We have the AAU element or the club basketball element in the spring and the summer. How do you think that's affected high school basketball?
I really think that is what we're seeing now. And I know there are now times where coaches don't call sets too much anymore, where you just come down and you play. Now, there's always been an element to that, but the AAU element is really about just open court playing, forcing the defense to respond to penetration or passing, and then reacting off of that, which is interesting to watch. But for a team, you've got to have such great continuity in your being able to play together as teammates, knowing and chemistry has to be great, because I go to games and I'm listening for, what's the play call? Well, nobody calls any plays anymore because it's all about moving the basketball, penetrating, and reacting from what the defense does. So AAU, that's AAU basketball. That is, nobody calls any plays because we don't practice enough to remember them. So that's the big thing. And also, we talked about the skill level before, and that's a huge thing too. I think big guys started to see, like, listen, I'm not touching the ball anymore. So people started to develop their ball handling and their outside shooting, because that's what AAU basketball became. And the more positionless you are, ultimately, the more recruitable you are, and the more of a weapon you are on the basketball court.
I mean, my one concern with the AAU or club basketball, though, is sometimes I feel like kids take that's going to make them better, which parts of it do make them better, because one, you get an opportunity, especially if you're playing at a higher AAU level, you get a chance to play against guys that you would not normally get to play against. But my fear is, I think you have being a coach, me being a coach, is where a kid can really develop is what do they do on their own.
Right.
And I used to use a term a lot with our players is what are you doing when no one's watching?
Right.
Are you in that driveway? Are you getting in the gym and getting shots up? And I always told kids, we would, especially we got to the summer, June has become a busy month for basketball coaches. But when June ended, I always told our kids, this is your time now. If you don't play any fall sport, July, August, when you come back in September, we're gonna know what you did, and that's kind of the difference I see with that. I think AAU has a good part, but I also think that kids need to understand where you get better is your individual skill development. We talked about how the game has changed. What do you see? Like, what's the constant thing? And I think you maybe mentioned a couple already. What's the constant thing, though, you see that basketball needs to continue to have for teams to be successful?
Well, the one thing that is going to be a constant is, to me, transition offense and defense. Can you get out and score easy baskets, and can you stop the other team from scoring easy baskets? Because no matter what, when you look at the end of a game, that's always a stat that I tracked a lot, because I knew if we could set up our defense or a team could set up their defense, it's going to be tougher to score. So if you can get easy baskets, that could change the game. So one of the things that's huge is is the transition element of the game. And some schools really do a great job with that. Some schools are their whole philosophy is around transition. And other schools say, we'll take it when we can, but that's going to be a constant. How you handle transition defensively, and can you get out and get easy baskets on the offensive end?
And I think when you mentioned that, I mean, and I've seen different styles. And one of the guys that, I mean, we never played him during the year, but we always scrimmaged him, was Bob Van Kendler at Dover. And Bob's just a believer in, running half-court sets. But the other part was, what you mentioned was, it was really hard to ever score on Dover because, one, their transition defense was so good, and they made you, if you were a transition team, they made you set up. And I think one of the things I really learned from Bob was, we would, as I said, we would scrimmage them and play them in the summer, and they were always so good on baseline and sideline out of bounds plays. And I think probably once I met Bob and we started doing that, that really became an emphasis for us because I heard Bob McKillop at Davidson talk at a clinic, and he talked about, made the football comparison about, your special teams, and his thing was those baseline out of bounds plays and those sideline out of bounds plays are special situations, and if you can win that special situation, that's a big difference with what you do. If we take a look at the area, in the area of basketball right now, here at the Christmas, New Year's break, for what you've seen in this area of basketball, who kind of stands out as teams that you would say that's a team that we're going to see maybe make a tournament run?
Wow. I haven't really seen as much as I would normally have during this part of the year, but I'm impressed with Shelby, and the way they've always played hard, but they've got some. To me, they've got really good length. They play solid defensively, and they've got a star.
They got a matchup problem.
A nightmare, yeah. And so I think they are solid. I am, obviously I'm very proud of the turnaround and the play at Mansfield Senior. I think Marquise has his team, playing well. I think they play hard. I think they have the talent, and you can see them growing each week. They had a setback this week, but I see them growing each week. So they're a team that I think can really do well later as the season plays out and plays on.
I think you talked about that Shelby, and kind of alluded to the Shelby Mansfield Senior matchup, which was I mean, I didn't get to see it. I saw highlights, but seemed like a really good game. And I'm thinking, one of the differences in that game was the Brushgotter kid. Right. One only being a junior, but he's kind of been through it. Yeah. I mean, he came off the bench when he's a freshman, and actually beat us on a shot at Shelby. And then, was a really good player as a sophomore, but I think, he's really grown in a lot of areas of his games. He's I think, more patient offensively. He can step out and shoot the three at 6'7". He was able to handle the pressure against senior high. Right. And I think the thing with senior high and looking at them is maybe the difference, one of the differences they have. They right now, I mean, they've got a really young core of players.
Right. Yes.
And they don't have kind of that one senior, that veteran that can kind of grab a hold and in those crucial times go, hey, this is what we need to do.
Right.
But I think you brought up a really good point too, is that's a team that is going to continue to grow. So the interesting part for senior high will be they had that setback last night versus Ashland. Right. And I'm sure that Coach Sykes is going to take a look at, well, how do we respond to that? Because one of the things I've always said, probably in coaching, after my initial 2 or 3 years, was when you take a look at your season, there's going to be adversity. I mean, you're never going to avoid it. It's going to come sometime in a form, and there's going to be a time in your season where that decision is going to have to be made. And I think as we talk about those two teams of Mansfield and Shelby might have had theirs right at the beginning. Right. That Madison game, it could have flipped the switch the wrong way. So here in the next week to 2 weeks, it'll be interesting to see how senior high responds to that. Yeah. I think as we take a look at the area too. I mean, we can't deny that Lex is off to a really good start. You know, they have really good balance. You know, the freshman, the Fogel kid has started out really well for a freshman, especially, you know, when you come in with that kind of hype. It's interesting to see, you know, how will your teammates accept you, which it seems like their seniors have done a really good job of that. And I think that's the other thing with Lex is they've got that core of seniors in Forup, Hudson Moore, and the point guard Young. That veteran leadership has got them off to a really good start. So I think as you take a look maybe at the smaller schools, I've got to see Crestview play once. You know, John Kurtz, he just kind of finds a way to win.
Always.
He wanted Crestview, went to Mansfield Christian and won, and now he's back at Crestview again, winning. So I think basketball, you know, this month of January kind of separates the teams a little bit. So it's going to be interesting to see how down the stretch that this season goes.
Well, and I think and you mentioned Lexington, and I think that right now they are, again, they're on a great trajectory because I think they're still getting better as well. You mentioned Braden Fogel, who is the games that I've seen. What I like about him most as a freshman is, especially coming in with all the hype, I don't feel like he presses. And to me, that is huge because, you know, it feels like he should come in. Feels like he's got to score every 30 every night, but he's got a solid all-around game. And I think, like you said, that team around him, and the way the coaching staff has created that culture, they're going to be tough to beat, but they're still growing. You know, there's certainly areas they can get better, but I think they're growing as well.
Well, and I think as a coach, you hope you haven't peaked at this time. You're hoping that you're going to continue to grow. And you know, there's going to be. I mean, I think Lex has played, I think maybe 8 games. So they probably have 12 to 14 games here in January that they're going to have to play. So it's going to be interesting. So let's talk kind of the final topic. Let's talk about. You know, there's already some play here in the OCC that you know, we have Mount Vernon's going to leave. We just had New Philly come in. I guess maybe talk a little bit about how you feel about how these leagues have kind of changed, because, you know, I experienced that when I was at Ontario. That, you know, we went. You know, when I first started coaching, we were in the MOC, Mid Ohio Conference. Then we went to the NCC and we were with Winford, Crawford, and those people. And then that league changed, and we went to the NOL, which I think I'm going to say 4 or 5 years, which was an outstanding league. I mean, the one bad thing is we had those trips to Bellevue and Sandusky, but for us it was really good. And now we went to the MOAC. So maybe give some feelings of what you see as far as how you think this league changes are going to play out, and is it good?
Well, I think that it's competitively, it's great. You know, it's good to see teams come into the league, and certainly you don't want, everybody kind of likes continuity within the league, but competitively around here, I think it's great. But speaking from the perspective as a coach, a former coach, and as we were talking before, as a volleyball dad, like I was, all I could think about when they talk about adding teams like Dover and even New Philly is, okay, Tuesday night volleyball, 7 o'clock, the girls' JV game goes long, so the girls don't get on until 8:30, and they got to have school in the morning. So the distance thing, I think, is it could be a challenge for some teams, but competitively, I think that it could be a good thing. We haven't had a whole lot of changeover in terms of changing leagues, but I remember going from the Ohio Heartland Conference to the Cardinal, and, you know, Mansfield Senior was a big fish in a small pond. But now it seems like, you know, teams have their play has risen, and now it is a very balanced, in my view, the OCC anyway, a very balanced league. And I think competitively, I think it's great. If they could just manage the travel, I think it would be a good thing.
I mean, the travel's interesting, and, you know, I've been through a thing where, you know, scheduling wise, you know, basketball, You would have, like, in the league, you would have a Friday and a Saturday night league game. I've been in situations where you play Tuesdays, Fridays. Now in the MOAC, like if the boys, like for example, the boys, I think played Thursday this week. I think there's an off, but typically if you played Thursday, then you had a league game on Saturday.
Right.
And then the next week it flopped that boys would play on Friday and then girls were playing Thursday, Saturday.
I see.
And to be actually, I kind of like that. Somebody said, well, how do you like that? I said, well, I really like the Thursday, Saturday, because I loved it a lot better than Tuesday, Friday. Because, like you said, if you made a trip to New Philly and you came back, you come to school Wednesday, you're going to expect that practice on Wednesday wasn't going to be very good. Whereas if you played on a Thursday, I don't care what you say, Friday's just a different day at school.
It is.
And so it gave you a day that, Friday you could have somewhat of a different practice and usually come in on Saturday morning, kind of do the review and then play. But that the travel could be a grind. And your other concern, I think, is a lot of people have said, well, why don't we have a league with just Shelby, Ontario, Mansfield, Madison? But I think what happens with that though too is you take a look at certain sports. I mean, I think for basketball, I think right now you could say it would be really competitive and teams are pretty equal.
Right.
But then you throw in some of the other sports, they're going to go, we don't want to do that.
Right.
So leagues, it'll be interesting to see how the OCC plays out, because I think especially in football, when you only have 7 teams, you get stuck that 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th week, trying to find a non-league game, and that gets really, really difficult. So
And I think the fact that the schools now, I know at Mansfield Senior, basketball-wise, I know we enjoyed the league because number one, the tournament format was one where you can go out and schedule how you wanted. We played a tough non-league schedule, which I thought was to prepare us for the league. And now I think you're going to start to see that more and more in sports like football, as they expand the playoff. More teams are going to go out non-league-wise and pick up those non-conference games that are going to be a little bit tougher now that they've expanded the playoff.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I've never really thought about that in football. So, well, Effie, appreciate you coming in to
no
talk.
problem. Thanks for having me.
As I said, Brian mentioned about doing this show, and I said I've always enjoyed talking high school basketball, so it's always great to have you here.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.